Alright, hello everyone. So, more discussion was sparked up by the fuzzy tweet this was going about on like, hey, Japan gets this dynamic a little bit, why aren't we on it? Which I don't think is 100% accurate, but I do want to mostly just talk about this dynamic. So I asked if I could talk about it, and Damn said if I put Rhythm Heaven in the video that I could talk about it. So yeah, I'm gonna put it in the background. I've never heard the soundtrack before, so hopefully you guys like it. But anyway, I just want to talk about this, you know. I might go over the rest of this thread after and talk about it a little bit, and my opinions on it. But I think mostly talking about this will help, because there's a few things I want to talk about, from what I think this chart gets right, what it gets wrong, and more importantly, why I don't think this really matters too much. So let's start by talking about Crab, because I first want to talk about soft versus hard counters and why Crab doesn't really fit. Like, if you wanted to put Crab on this chart, Crab kind of goes here, because Crab does everything. So, I think one thing that's really important to understand about Crab, especially during Crab meta, this was a big point as to why it took forever until it, like, Crab got actual nerfs for it to drop off, is Crab's value is not just this, and like shooting other people and holding space. It's also this. It's also ball form and the HP of the special, right? So let's use one interaction in particular. Let's look at Jetpack versus Crab, right? And I get the idea here. Like, 2 shots from Jet, if you hit it correctly, can break Crab. Most of the time it'll probably require a third, but let's say 2 to 3 shots from Jet breaks Crab. So Jetpack is popped, it shoots at me, I pop Crab, I ball form around, they break my Crab, and I don't die. Who won that interaction value-wise? Like, obviously the Jetpack broke my special, but the Jetpack didn't shoot anyone else, and it recalls, and it goes away. Whereas when my Crab breaks, I instantly can start shooting back. I can go back to painting the map, or doing main weapon things, or whatever. Technically, the Crab gets better value in this circumstance. And obviously, that's not the only way the interaction can go. Like, Jetpack could break the Crab and kill it, in which, yeah, of course, that's more value for the Jetpack user. But also, or maybe the Crab is already set up, and Jetpack popped on a Crab doesn't work because Crab shoots the Jetpack first. And the interaction can even be smaller than that. It can just be Jetpack hits Crab one time and helps something else kill it. And I think the thing that I really like about Crab is most of its interactions are a lot more smaller scale, you know? Like, if I'm a range and I shoot at the top of a Crab, and then they ball form for a little bit, and then that's it, you know? Say we don't interact with each other for the remaining 6 seconds of the special. I've still got rid of 2 seconds of Crab, because it had to ball form and heal and then pop back up and start shooting. That's still value against the special, it just doesn't fully mitigate it. Crab is full of these hard and soft counters, and it's also very flexible. Like, you can use it as a defensive special. Like, my example was using it to tank a Jetpack, right? That's something like what Bubble does. And in fact, the cool part about this is Bubble has a lot of the same dynamics. Usually, yeah, Crab beats Bubble, but sometimes having a Bubble that tanks most of Crab is going to be better for the Bubble. Sometimes that's what you actually want from it. It depends. You know, so that's why I think Crab is in the middle. But there are more, you know, interactions that are actually like this. Like Strike versus Bubble. This is Strike favorite. Yeah, pretty obvious. One strike basically kills the entire bubble, and it forces everyone outside of it. So, like, this would absolutely be a hard counter. And, like, Bubble to Zuka, you know, we could be fair and put it on there, right? Bubble to Zuka could be considered a hard counter. You pop a bubble, and it takes the entire Zuka to break it. Sometimes one of the shots goes through afterward, but, you know, typically gonna be able to tank enough of the Zuka to be worth it. Jetpack will usually be able to kill a strike user. It's not as easy as it looks, because they can just throw the strikes at you, and you have limited mobility. So this is another one that's a little bit more not clear-cut, but okay, let's go like, sure. That kind of dynamic holds through. Even in cases where this does hold true, there's 2 things I want to point out. One, that I don't think it's that simple, and 2, I don't particularly think this is a dynamic we should want more of. So, first off, let's talk about strike a little bit. So, let's say let's specifically use a bucket for this, right? I'm a bucket, and pretend I have strike, and I'm fighting Junior, because that's our bubble weapon of discussion lately has been Junior. So I have strike, and the Junior is going to have a bubble soon. They're going to rush in a zone, and I want to have my strike to counter it. However, until that bubble is deployed, if I'm sitting back to save my strike, I'm not contesting space. Like, you could try to contest space safely, but if I'm fighting someone, and then the Junior bubbles, I can't just pop strike and go for the bubble in the middle of the fight, and more importantly, I could die in that fight, and if I die in that fight, I can't strike the bubble. So if I want to hold strike for that bubble, I have to sit back and not engage as much. You know, I could still, like, throw bombs. I wouldn't be doing nothing, right? But I'm doing less. And that main weapon dynamic opens up a lot. That's why Neo Splash does a lot better at this, because Neo Splash is going to sit there, look at the Junior painting around and throwing bombs until it bubbles, and just do the same thing. It'll also paint around and throw bombs without interacting until the Junior bubbles. The reason Bucket's still good in a strike, you know, one, because it can still strike bubble, but the other factor is Bucket could do this to demolish the bubble. You know, and Stamper's the same thing. Like, Stamper doesn't have to zip cast through the bubble to hard counter it. It can also just shoot the top of it. So, when the specials are not active, the dynamic between strike and bubble still exists and affects the decision-making of the players around them. The other factor, why do I think we don't want this? In my opinion, I think what's really important for balance is that specials should not be an auto-win button against each other. I don't like the idea of one strike demolishes the entire bubble, and that's how simple the interaction is. I think if strike didn't break bubble, like if it required 2, like it used to, it would be a more interesting interaction, because strike is still going to force everyone out of the bubble. It's still going to get major value because of that, you know? And that's a dynamic you have to play around in terms of how do you utilize that. If you want to use only one strike on the bubble, then you have to actually follow up and kill the people outside of the bubble before they walk back in. That's a more inherently interesting interaction that creates more dynamic to me. Rather than just, oh, one strike's on the bubble, it's dead, they have 2 more to use on other things, obviously, it just wins. GG. What I want to talk about more is that, compared to Splatoon 2, I think the issue with this kind of balancing that the devs are going for is most of the time, it is not specials v specials. It is specials v players. And a lot of the meta is already built around it if you think about it. Like, the exception is stuff like Splash, where strike does matter a lot for it because you're gonna have 12 strikes. But, you know, Bucket's not gonna get a lot of strike. Even if we talk about something like Kraken to counter bubble, would you really pick range so that you have a Kraken to counter a bubble? Range will get like 1 Kraken for every 3 Junior bubbles on the field. It's gonna happen sometimes, but it's not what you play around. The main weapon interactions against specials are a lot more important. Can your support outpaint a tri-strike? Can your AoE weapon effectively deal with crab? Or can your DPS weapon effectively force them out of crab? Does your dually have mobility to deal with a jetpack or a Zuka to be able to move out of the way? Do you have options to break bubble or get into a bubble shield? Etc, 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 right? Anyway, I do want to wrap this up. I could talk a little bit about specials as the roles they need in a team. Like, if you need paint, you'll pick a tri-strike. If you need a entry special, you'll pick something like Zuka to help get you in, etc. But I think that goes a little bit off topic for a little bit here. So my point is more that I don't want to deny this dynamic exists for the most part, because it does. But if I could give 3 takeaways from this. 1, a lot of the interactions are more nuanced than this. It shouldn't just be looked at as hard counters. A few of them exist like strike bubble, but for the most part there's a lot more back and forth to the interaction that's very important, even for specials I haven't talked about. Like for example, strike is a great way to give Vac a full charge shot, which is the main thing you want to do with Vac these days. 2, most of the interactions are going to be main weapon versus specials, and the dynamics between that are a bit more important, unless if it's a weapon like Neo Splash that has its specials often. And 3, regardless of this dynamic, if you need specials for a specific purpose, like paint or entry, you're going to be picking the specials for that anyway. We don't want too many hard counters. It's better to have soft counters when balancing the game so that there's more depth to our interactions. So that's my thoughts on everything. Thanks for letting me do this video. See ya.